Only one tent got blown into a lake that night, but dozens of goats were counted and elk were seen. And if you haven't done a survey, I highly, highly, highly encourage you to get out and do a survey with us this summer. It is so rewarding. So I always like to tell folks what I love about the Goat Alliance is that it is an organization that is easy to support with your body or your paycheck, whichever one is stronger than the other, or both, if both happen to be in great health. For my day job, I run 2% for Conservation, which certifies businesses and individuals that give 1% of their time and 1% of their income to fish and wildlife conservation causes. And that's how I met Shannon originally. Her business, Gastrognome, is certified with us. You'll see it right on every single one of their packages. And without taking it any further, Shannon, why don't you tell us a bit about yourself?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Shannon Waters, and I own Gastrognome Meals, and I am the chef there. In my previous life, I was an avid chef in Michelin-starred restaurants between New York, San Francisco, places of that sort, and I got a ton of training, both in culinary school, but around the world, hunting down some of the best chefs in different cuisines. So a lot of training in different parts of the world, but mostly because I was curious about different ways to cook things. And now I'm applying that to backcountry food and freeze-dried food. So we have a backcountry food company that has now 10 freeze-dried meals that are just like any other backpacking food where you pour water over, but we start with incredible ingredients from all around Montana and use my techniques that I've learned through my career in the culinary fields to make the best freeze-dried meals. So that's a little bit about me.
All right. And with that, we're so thankful for having you on this call specifically to talk about something that is like it's a contentious issue, especially among goat hunters, which is how do you cook a mountain goat? And we have anyone who has eaten mountain goat has probably had bad mountain goat, more than likely. The odds are really, really high. And we're going to get into why that is. But for us, from a conservation perspective, we care about this because we're trying to keep these animals on the landscape, right? We're trying to have the most healthy populations that we can, and hunting is a big part of that. And so to have as part of the hunt, the body of these animals that we're conserving, that we're making sure have great habitat for feed, making sure they have great habitat and security for raising their young, making sure they have great habitat to live a full and wonderful life. To have the idea that the body might go to waste is just abhorrent, right? Even from a conservation perspective in all fields, when an animal needs to be removed from the landscape for the sake of the population, to think of that body being wasted is just awful. So taking care of the body properly and using it in a respectful way, but also a way that the people who are doing that work really enjoy is super important. So Shannon, if you want to kick off like where this starts, where does it start for taking care of the goat after, the trigger's been pulled, the arrow's been loosed?
Yeah, I think many hunting forums and many hunting communities that you're looking through, if you're going on a goat hunt and trying to get all the best data on it, will give you everything from how to e-scout for these animals all the way to what game bags you need to carry them out in. But less attention is paid to the parts afterwards where you're actually doing something with the meat and you're actually eating it. So I do think it starts in the field. I think clean field dressing and proper care for the meat once you get it home is 100% going to be the most impactful on the quality of the meat that you have once you get it there. So thinking about when you're hunting these animals, what kind of weather conditions you're going to be in, are you set up to get that to your car and back home as quickly as possible? And what kind of setup do you have at home that's ready to store your harvest? I think that's number one where I would start is proper field dressing and care once you get it home.
And with that, you mentioned season and something a lot of folks might not know. So one thing we really advocate heavily for is, there are some places where taking nannies is what game managers want. But in most cases, most hunters are trying to go after billies. And billies are a little different, or goats are a little different, mountain goats, in that they tend to have their rut later in the year. later in the fall. And a lot of folks don't know this, but the billies actually go under a physiological change when they are moving into the rut. As extreme, maybe more extreme than what you see with like whitetails. You know, the whitetails will get these huge necks, and people talk about not wanting to eat like a rutted out buck's neck meat, right? Because it's full of hormones. Well, with a billy will start actually like urinating on its sides going into the late fall. Starting in even in August, they can or earlier, they can start doing that. You start seeing those dark patches on their sides. It's one of the identifiers we use for picking out a billy. If you're looking at the meat that's in those areas come end of the fall, going into winter, those areas can be just that much more challenging. And I use challenging as a delicate term here for utilizing from the goat. So thinking seasonality too. I mean, obviously we're going to hunt them when we get the chance, right? Your tag lasts for certain amounts of time in different places. But the later in the season you go, those areas, they build armor to protect themselves from goring each other. You read about biologists who've been out there watching them in November, and they develop these armor plates. It's a total physiological change. It affects the meat both in texture and flavor. And so thinking about seasonality from a biological perspective, it's not something you think about with all animals, but think about that whitetail with the big rutted out neck, and you kind of get the idea. Let's talk about breaking down the animal. What would you do for versatility in the kitchen with breaking down a mountain goat? A lot of folks just say, hey, I'm going to burger it. What are your thoughts on that, Shannon?
Well, I think in breaking it down, still going back to the field dressing thing, if we're thinking about how to quickly get it out of the mountains and how to best care for it, just make sure that you're prepared to break down that animal. It's probably your first and only goat experience. But don't let that be the thing that takes you 3 hours to do while you're out there. So watch a ton of videos, practice butchery, even if it's not the same type of animal, just practice butchery on stuff at home, like pick up a whole chicken, pick up a whole turkey, just get used to holding that same blade over and over again. So you're not wasting time in the field. So just thinking about that when it comes to speed out there. But then for breaking down the animal, we did get a question in there that was like, well, I'm just going to grind all of it because that seems like the most reasonable thing to do. And what do I do next? And 100% grinding is a great way to cheat the whole thing. And it's fast and it's easy. And it makes sure that, you've got these nice little packages that you'll probably just pull out of the freezer and use quickly. But it doesn't provide the most versatility when it comes to cooking, especially when we start thinking about different types of ways that we're going to cook it, which we'll get to later. But I would start by breaking it down kind of in the way that you would a deer, like back straps, tenderloins. I would 100% take all the rib meat. Again, this is like a once in a lifetime animal. You want to take everything out of there. Break it down with shanks so that you can braise the shanks later, and dice some of the bigger muscles, keep some of them whole, grind a lot of the scrappy parts, but not the whole animal. There's going to be plenty of meat that you're like, this neck, I don't know what to do with it. You'll have plenty of grind, but keeping some of those larger muscles whole is going to be great. I'd keep an entire leg whole, and we can talk about how to cook that. So really a bunch of different meat structure is what you're going to want to end up with for the most versatility in your cooking. So don't grind the whole thing, grind the whole thing.
And it's super important, like you said, go fast. One other thing that makes goats really, really unique and on their own. First off, a lot of folks think that they're goats. They're actually not. Mountain goats are not goats. They're not even in the goat family. They're in their own genus, their own species. Their closest relatives are the Serow and Grawl, and then also the Chamois, but the Serow and Grawl over in Eastern Asia. Those are their closest relatives. And what goats have that no other species in North America has, pronghorn have something similar, but nowhere near as aggressive, is this set of enzymes and bacteria that are passed down congenitally from nanny to kid that causes their body, everything in their body to break down very, very, very fast. It lives in between the meat and their skin. So you get that hide off as fast as you can. You are removing a lot of the stuff, those off flavors that can show up in your goat. If you can get that skin off as fast as possible, as soon as you can. And again, where we hunt these things, right? We could be talking like as fast as possible was 8 hours later, when you finally got up to it, trying to traverse the mountainside. But if you can get that off of there, get that bacteria and enzyme that live in between their skin and their muscles off of them as fast as possible, it's going to have a huge effect on the meat. Let's think about looking at the fat. You mentioned like, burgering, not great. What is it about goats that makes them not as leaning towards burgering as, let's say, an elk that has eaten a lot of alfalfa, or a whitetail that's eaten a lot of alfalfa?
Well, goats don't have intramuscular fat. And so you're not going to see any type of marbling that you would with beef or anything like that. So one, it's going to be incredibly lean. And at that point, you're going to be mixing it with pork or whatever your chosen thing is to mix in with your burger, pork, beef, whatever. But I think if we're talking about trying to enhance and approach the goat meat, that's just going to cover it up. And you're not going to end up with really something that you can use goat for. And it's just this like beautiful, exclusive goat thing. If you make burgers out of it and you're mixing it with like 50% beef, you basically have a beef burger. And you really won't be able to get the most out of the meat that way as far as flavor goes. And you really have to bump up the fat content. If you're adding in pork fat there, then you've got pork, beef, and goat. Nothing wrong with that. But if we're talking about really enhancing the goat meat, I think that's not the best direction to go with it.
So you don't want to end up making, basically a beef burger or pork sausage that happens to have some goat seasoning. Yeah. Let's talk about thinking about how the different parts are used. Like most folks, they'll go with, like a whitetail or an elk, and they'll look at the back straps and the tendies, right? And those they think of them as like the end all cut, right? And a lot of times can miss out on a lot of other cuts with those. When we're talking about goat, that problem is exacerbated by not realizing all the potential with the different cuts. Is there anything you want to talk about that, and maybe how that kind of leans into thinking about where, even though these aren't true goats, mechanically and realistically cooking them can be a lot like goat, how that works with other cultures as well, and how they look at cuts of meat?
Yeah, I have a couple of thoughts about that. I think if you are breaking the animal down and you're at home and you're putting all these different cuts of meat aside, I personally think that backstrap and tenderloin for this are going to be amazing. If you already have an aversion to this goat flavor and you're already in your head saying, I'm not going to like this, this is going to be too gamey, this is going to taste like whatever I have goat pictured like in my mind, maybe taking the backstrap and tenderloin route isn't going to be the best thing, because with those aren't things that you want to like low and slow braise. Those are things that you're probably going to do relatively quickly. You're going to do minimal work to change the flavor on, which I think you can do beautiful things with the backstrap and tenderloin in that way. But it depends on your comfort level with the flavors that you're going at. And if you're ready for goat and you just want to go straight towards it, the backstrap and tenderloin are going to be awesome. And if you have specific questions about what I would do with that, I'm happy to answer that. But in that way, you can do so little to make such a beautiful dish. But if you're in the boat that's like, I don't know that I want to taste this to its like fullest and brightest extent, then we're going to want to go the route of something braised and low and slow, something that was probably marinated overnight in some flavors that can sit at the table with the meat instead of be covered up by it or actually cover the whole goat. You want to find some complementary flavors for that. But if you are in the like, I'm kind of scared of this goat meat situation, I would go larger muscle structures and probably low and slow route. But backstrap and tenderloin are going to be great. 100%. I would get behind that, and happy to talk about some specific recipes for that. Yeah.
So in looking at cultures to embrace, what would be some cultural foods? Top of mind to me is birria. People who have had street tacos, they're like, what is birria? What, and then they taste it like, oh my God, it's so delicious. And then they find out what cut it's made from. That comes to mind right away. I know you've done lots of other things. There's something you've done recently with Randy Newberg with one of his goats. What are some cultures people should look towards for finding great inspiration for cooking their mountain goat?
Well, like you said earlier, these goats are not the same as other goats that we're thinking of, the domesticated goats. But I would say, as far as flavor goes, they're actually quite similar. So thinking about some cultures that have traditionally cooked with goat, and still do, Mexico is a great example. Like you said, the birria, barbacoa would be fantastic. India has an incredible amount of dishes that are almost always made with goat. Biryani, to name one, or the rogan josh. Both are going to be really delicious. But if you even just did a quick Google of like classic Indian dishes made with goat, you'd have this plethora of ideas to go from. So India, Mexico, Africa, tons of great goat stews, goat curries from Africa. That would be a fantastic rabbit hole to go down if you wanted to search what they had been doing with goat previously, or some modern dishes now. Jamaica, the same thing. Those are all going to offer totally like flavors from totally different corners of the universe and very different cooking styles. And what I would say for these things, if you're looking to places and cultures that have been cooking with goat for a really long time, go towards those techniques and those flavors. Like if you're seeing this and you're like, but I don't have that pepper. Pretty much everything you can imagine is available to you on Amazon at this point. And there's a reason why it's cooked with that. It's very complementary to the goat or whatever purpose that it serves in that dish. I would encourage you to seek out those ingredients and 100% follow the technique to a T. Even if it's something that you're like, I've never done anything like that. I don't even understand how that works. That's part of what compels me to learn other cultures' food, is looking at something going, that's like not cooking to me. I don't understand that. I would go like this, this, and this. The best part is doing it the other way and finding out that it turns out a beautiful result. So if you're going to venture down those avenues, go towards their techniques, go towards those ingredients. And I think you'll be super pleasantly surprised that it turns out amazing. And conversely, I would say if you're looking at modern recipes more from like, I'm not sure who would be offering up modern goat recipes, but ones that offer like shortcuts that tell you that this is a faster, easier way to get to the same result, I would avoid all shortcuts. I would do the thing that is supposed to take longer. It's the thing you don't understand, so that you turn out with an incredible result. A shortcut will always leave you shorthanded.
Yeah, the 4-hour asabuco. No, just don't. Yeah, the shortcut is going to leave you running short, essentially. Well, let's say someone is scared, like they're all right. You talked about curry, talked about Jamaican, you talked about Mexican. This sounds spicy, Shannon. My tummy don't like spicy any more than my mouth does. What would you say that there's other ways to embrace those cultures, or is it all just about making it as hot as possible?
No,
and I'm thinking about our Canadian people, because I see Darren grinning. So
no, I think in general, there's plenty of dishes that aren't going to have spice levels to them. The African goat stew that I'm thinking of has no spice to it whatsoever. It's like tomatoes, peppers, and peanuts. So there are some milder options. There's also plenty of directions you could go if you're thinking about like Greek and Mediterranean food that aren't going to have any chilies in them. And will offer totally different flavor profiles. And again, a quick Google search of like classic Greek goat dishes, it's going to turn out this plethora of options for you that use all sorts of ingredients that we might have here and definitely won't hit you with spice. So plenty of opportunities to cook from different cultures in different parts of the world without hitting those spice notes.
Awesome. Thank you. One of the things I think we've talked about, I know we've talked about before, is the, the low and slow, but also the availability of acid to break down meats that are very tough. And when we're talking about billies, especially like if you get a late season billy, that is a tough animal. What it has had to do to survive to November, December on any given year is going to make it an absolutely almost roided out individual, the most extreme animal we have in North America. I would put it up against almost anything. But the availability of acid, what would you say that that's more approachable than maybe like if someone doesn't own, some of the clay pots or things like that? That's if someone goes and looks at recipes on, Good Foods or whatever. What would you recommend on that front for breaking down some of those tougher cuts?
Well, for most of the things that I'm thinking of, especially outside of like backstrap and tenderloin route, most of the dishes that I would imagine making are marinated overnight in something that has some sort of acid. While you don't think like yogurt, traditionally, you're not in your mind like, oh, wow, that's super acidic. It is. It'll provide those same benefits if you're marinating that meat overnight, which you'll see in most of those Indian dishes. For something like the African goat stew, it's probably marinated in those tomatoes and some blend of herbs and spices prior to cooking. So I think taking the extra step and the effort to go and marinate the meat a day ahead of time. Yes, it takes a little bit of planning, but again, this is like your once in a lifetime animal. You can marinate this meat for one day. So yeah, there are workarounds to pretty much everything, but acid can be found in most marinades.
What would you recommend? Let's say you're trying to make something, you get your goat in November. Now it's January. Or let's say it's, you're wanting to cook goat and your mountain goat in January, you're wanting to cook it again in June, you've told your family they're coming into town in August to visit you before school starts up again. You got some mountain goat you want to share with the family. Different times of the year. What are you thinking about when you're thinking of mountain goat meat?
Yeah, I mean, that's the way that I determine pretty much everything that I eat is, what do I feel like? What is it like outside? What kind of spice level can I tolerate in this heat? Things like that. Seasonality directs pretty much every dish I ever make, including what's available to me at the grocery store or the farmer's market. So I would encourage people to do the same. Like if it's January, you're not looking at the grill like, wow, I think maybe I should cook everyone these backstraps on the grill tonight and we'll do some like tomato salad. Start thinking in a way that provides you the opportunity to work with the best produce, but also nourish yourself in a way that makes sense with the seasons. So if it's January, I'm thinking about inside, I'm picturing like a big Dutch oven. It's got really hot things kind of bubbling and boiling, and I'm picturing warm spices, whether or not that's spicy or not, but something like earthy and deep and filling. So I would definitely think, how do I want to feel when I'm eating this? What do I want to taste when I'm eating this? What's available to me as far as produce goes? Where am I cooking this? Is it inside or outside? So starting there allows me to create a dish that is totally different per season. And if it's January, I'm going some kind of curry. I'm probably going a Jamaican goat curry because it will push my family to their limits as far as what they're willing to eat. And I enjoy doing that. So, yeah.
You're mentioning dishes here. Let's say you were forced to list five dishes that if you had a mountain goat and you knew you had to make 5 different dishes just off the top of your head. I mean, we've named them, but this is a chance for people to like take notes, to go in and ask questions later or Google later. What would be 5 that you would absolutely go for?
Well, it's funny. I hadn't been thinking about ossobuco, but I would actually do that. Like 100%, I would take a shank and make a beautiful ossobuco with it. I think those flavors would complement it wonderfully, like deep, rich tomato, picturing it over a bed of polenta. Sounds like a great application for a part that you would otherwise grind or maybe get rid of. So ossobuco for sure. And that's going to come from Italy.
And with that part, you're talking about the shank, right? The forearm.
Yep.
Yep.
I would definitely do an Indian dish. I think biryani is really fun, and I would probably do that. That would be one of my go-tos. I would make barbacoa for sure. I think that would be another, and these are so totally different as far as flavor profile goes. I think they're all over the board, which is fun. You get to work with different cuisines, cultures, and ingredients if you do this. which you would have to start by making sure that you broke down the animal in a way that allowed you this opportunity. The whole leg route, I would find a really fun opportunity to have people over and roast this whole goat leg. And I would probably go the direction of like oregano and garlic, those types of flavors, like Greek and Mediterranean, and picturing the side dishes that would go with it. It just makes sense in my head, like rosemary roasted potatoes, things like that. An African goat stew, mostly because it's so far off course of what I normally eat, like peanuts ground into a sauce with tomatoes and peppers. Sounds like a really fun way to experience the goat. And then one of the dishes that I did make and was a really fun story with a very old goat that I was visiting with Randy Newberg over at his office, which is pretty close to ours. And he was like laughing, we're leaving. And he's like, I have this really old goat and I feel like you can't turn this into something that's edible. And I was like, no, I can make anything edible. Give me this old goat.
To have Randy say that too. I've eaten beaver kneecaps in his office before. So, and muskrat.
Yeah, he was sure that this was impossible. And he was like, I'm also going to give you the worst cut. I'm giving you the neck. And I was like, okay, I can make this happen. And I took it home and I made these beautiful mole tamales that are rich. There's chocolate in it. There's chilies in it. There's peanuts, sesame, back to them in a form of tamales. Actually, I pulled up a picture of this earlier. I can share my screen really quick. And made these tamales with a salsa verde. And that is one thing I would go back to. I didn't follow a recipe or anything. I just was like, okay, I've got really old, not just it's old, but the goat was very old, goat neck to deal with. And what flavors do I know will not hide it, but complement it in a way that's surprising. And that's what I came up with. So that was a really fun one that I would definitely redo. Let me see if I can share this.
I had some tamales. I mentioned this before when we were talking. I had some mountain goat tamales down at a Wyoming Wildlife Federation fundraiser a couple of years ago. And they said, here, have a tamale, and then we'll tell you what it is. And I ate it and I was like, pronghorn? Maybe? This is really good. And they're like, no, mountain goat. And I was like,
okay, here is oh, it won't let me. Well, maybe I'll send it to you and see if you can share it.
Stacy should be able to.
Okay, I'll send it to Stacy.
Yeah.
As actually Carla will have to.
Okay, so
Carla, you'll have to give Shannon sharing permission, Carla.
Oh, great. Well, I sent you a photo of the tamales. You're free to share it.
Okay.
While that's happening, I'll share a couple of the ones I've had. I have yet to be able to get on a goat hunt where I'm the trigger puller myself. I've gone with others. I've gone with a 73-year-old man on with a longbow, and it was his fifth, and he had only ever drawn them. Didn't buy them at auction or whatever. He'd been hunting them since the 50s. So I've gotten goat a couple times, and the first time I got it, I tried cooking it up the way you cook venison, and that was not the experience. But the other two times I made it, the second time I made a birria out of it, which is, it's similar to osabuco, but, very Hispanic. It's got lots of bold flavors from orange juice. You actually throw animal crackers in there sometimes. I did with mine, and made some tacos with it that were, and it wasn't super spicy because, I got people in my family who aren't into that whole thing. But then also I've used, in the last 2 years, I've used koji, which is a rice that is the base of sake. It's the base of soy sauce, the base of miso paste. It's not a rice, it's a Aspergillus oryzae fungus, but they put it on the rice or the barley or whatever it is. Well, there's the tamales. That's delicious. Yeah. Anyway, it breaks down the meat. Those look so good. I'm going to shut up about the koji. So tell us a little bit about these.
So the base of the tamales, those are corn husks that they're in. And I actually grilled them and then steamed them just to reheat them. But inside there's some masa that is just lightly seasoned with salt and a little bit of cumin. So when you open it, you'll see the masa, but then you'll see the actual goat meat, which has been braised in the mole. And I pulled up the recipe so I could share it later if people wanted it. And it has like 30 ingredients in this, from raisins to cinnamon, chocolate, bacon fat, all these delicious things that the goat cooked in. And then you shred it, you take a little bit of the sauce and you place it down the middle of that masa, fold it up. I grilled it and then we steamed it when I got there, served with a little bit of salsa verde, which is just cilantro and garlic. And I can't remember what else I put in that guy, but they turned out to be little handheld delicious bites.
They
Those
look
look
amazing.
They look so good. Raisins are and like dates and figs and plums are like unsung heroes when it comes to things like goat, like mountain goat, and what they do to give some body to, again, an extremely, like the fact that people grind up goat. You are taking the leanest animal in North America and turning it into basically like bone meal. When you go and grind it up into burger, or when you try to make like a sausage out of it, like, again, unless you're making like a chorizo or something with a lot of flavor to like try to coax some stuff out, you took something that was really special and beat it up. On that note of beating it up, what about, and again, this is probably half of goat hunters, the goat shot. Now 9 times out of 10, that goat's going to fall. It's going to fall not a small amount sometimes. Half of hunters are going to end up with a goat that has gone through a tenderizer from the moment it was shot. What would you recommend? You know, what do you do if you're stuck? What do you do if you're lost? You're like, I don't know what to do with this goat.
Well, we talked about a few things earlier, like if you're going to grind it, that's great. I really don't recommend grinding the whole thing. I do think grinding allows you to have a bit of like a cheater plan to a quick meal, but be prepared to make something other than ground meat into a burger. I would make something like a bolognese, a tomato sauce with that traditionally has ground meat in there. But then if you're super stuck and you're like, I'm kind of lost and I really don't know what to do. I eat, sleep, and breathe food, and it's all I think about, and it's all I do all day long. I'm in the kitchen and thinking about flavors. So if you have a question, you get stuck. There's not so many of you in here that I can't answer questions. Just shoot me either an email, it's listed on the website, or shoot us a DM on our Instagram and just say like, I have this cut of goat that I set aside and I don't know what to do with it. What do you think I should do? I'm happy to inspire some ideas. And those things come to me really quickly. And I just love talking about food. So if you get lost, do that. I also grabbed 2 books from my shelf that I feel like are great, and they won't have goat things in them, but they will help you get unstuck when it comes to thinking about how to use the animals. And these are old books. I'm not into like the new fandangled ways of cooking. As you'll guess, cooking by hand. It's really about how to cook by hand. There's no color photos in here. It's a lot of words. But it's a beautiful way to get unstuck. If you look up braising or whole cuts of meat in here, you're going to find something that'll kind of shake you out of it. And then the flavor Bible, which is my go-to. It's like all tatted and ratted. And it's my go-to when I get stuck. So if I'm thinking about goat and I'm like, okay, I know I want this to be with tomatoes and ginger. You can look up every ingredient in the world in this book, and it will give you flavor affinities that are complementary of it. And often this is how I get unstuck. I go to the flavor Bible, I'm thinking about ginger, I look at it and it says cardamom and cumin, and I'm like, oh, I'm going to India with this. Got it. Okay. So 2 books that I would recommend if you are stuck, the Flavor Bible and Cooking by Hand, are great ones to just have in the kitchen. But again, feel free to use me as a resource. And I would love to talk about goat.
And it's, again, something that it shouldn't be like this, right? Like we're having this webinar mainly because it shouldn't be, the status quo is so broken. I was at an event with a couple of the board members who are on this call in a province of Canada that I will not shame by mentioning, but they can hunt goats over the counter. Okay, so like here in the lower 48, we got to put in for them. And in my case, I could put in for mountain goat for the rest of my life and never hunt. That is statistically the probability is that I will never hunt a mountain goat in Montana. And up there, it's over the counter. And guys just say they choose not to because they don't like how it tastes. I was asking folks because I knew we were going to do this call eventually. We didn't know who it was going to be with and all. And I'm stoked we got you for it because you're perfect for this. But I was asking folks, you know, what do you do with your goat? What do you do? And all but two, and I asked like 50 people that weekend, all but two said, I burger it.
Wow.
And oh my God, what a waste. And that's how I would have taken it too, until I started exploring other cuisines from, you know, watch some Anthony Bourdain, decide I wanted to sit on a little plastic stool, eating something sloppy somewhere, you know, and had some goat birria down in Mexico and had, you know, some of these other things. I'm like, why can't we do this with mountain goat? So having a resource like you is super, super valuable. And we're just so thankful that you took the time to do this call today. Let's get into some questions. Stacy, have we had any pass through in the time so far?
No, there's nothing in the chat.
Nothing
But
in
I
the
think
chat.
there were some that got submitted early, so I think you can dive into those ones.
Okay.
If any didn't get answered.
Shannon, did any come through to your team?
We got a couple over the course of a few over the course of a few weeks, and the one that I wanted to address was the grinding of all the meat thing. And I think we answered that one pretty thoroughly. I think there's plenty of ways to break down the animal once you're at home in ways that offer you more versatility than the grinding. And again, I think it's not the best way to use goat meat. I think you're going to get stuck, and a goat burger is not going to make you feel good about goat. So if you are going to grind, use it in something with more complex flavor profiles available, like a pasta sauce that uses ground meat already. Check out something that uses ground beef, and don't turn them into, you know, sausages that you want to eat with ketchup and mustard, because it's just not gonna do the goat justice, and it's gonna stop you in the kitchen from doing a lot of fun exploring.
I think about, like, you know, all the effort that goes into a goat hunt, and you want to make a cheeseburger out of it.
I mean, there's
You
nothing
know.
wrong with a burger. I like burgers. I just think that with goat, it's just not the best meeting of all the flavors that are possible with it. And it might not give you the best outcome. You might not be like, wow, I'm floored about this goat. You might be like, oh, I don't really know. I'd rather have a beef burger. We want you to make that are like, I will always want to make this with goat.
Yeah, absolutely. We just got a question in. This is from Ryan. What type of heat do you prefer? So that's heat with an H. Do you prefer for whole parts that are bone in like a leg? Dry heat like fire, or is braising better?
Well,
I think this is going to come down to style, probably.
Yeah,
right?
I think kind of, because if you're going to go the whole leg route, like we're talking about the actual whole leg, I would probably do more of a drier heat, wrapping it in foil with some sort of moisture in there. There's going to be some vegetables that have some moisture in there, but I would either, depending on the season, put it in the oven and let it go slow and low. Or if I had a grill or something that was open fire available to me, I would do it on that. Similarly, like low and slow, it's going to take a long time either way, but I would base that on what do you have available to you. If you have dry heat like fire, go outside, get after it. That sounds like a great summer project to like have some friends over. You have this thing on a spit and it's rotating, and low and slow again. But if it's the winter, I would pop it in the oven. So two different ways. I think those are both great. And as far as heat goes, low and slow is really the only option. Like if you tried to go fast and hot, we got to switch out of the whole muscle things with bone in. So
we got a question in that. That was awesome. Also, just to cap that off before the next question, I have a indigenous Hawaiian friend down in Kauai who they get goat all the time, right? Because they got a feral goat problem on some of those islands, and not mountain goat, but goats that were introduced, right? And they'll often do the dry heat outside, sometimes whole body. I don't know if I'd recommend that for goat, mountain goat, because of what, again, the falling that we're dealing with and stuff. But pineapple does a number on tough meat, and especially low and slow. Here's a question from Andrew: Would you follow muscle lines to separate and determine the cuts of meat you have, similar to how most folks break down? They'll look for the round roast, the rump roast and a whitetail or something like that. Would you follow the muscle lines to separate and determine cuts of meat you have? Or would you change how you butcher the certain muscle groups to get more out of the goat? And so you start thinking then, I think what he's describing is how, like, when someone breaks down, pork chops or something like that, you're not cutting a muscle group, you're cutting a cut. What would be your recommendation along those, in that mentality?
So thinking about the way that I'm going to utilize the whole goat, I would separate along the muscle lines where you're naturally drawn to pull a knife through. That's what I would do. Where the muscles that you see are like, oh, this comes apart right here, do that. If it gets to the point where you're like, this is too much work and I just want a big old chunk, when you braise it, it'll braise the same. So that low and slow method will take care of any like butchery mishaps that you either didn't understand what you were doing, maybe just made a mistake, or maybe just straight up got lazy. Like, I don't want to do this anymore. I just want my chunks of meat. The low and slow will cure any of those problems. But if it were me, I had some time, my room was cold, I'm going to separate it out based on the lines that I know they should be. But for a goat, I'm not going to be like, oh, I need these like cutlets like this and like that, because that's not how I'm going to end up cooking this. The only thing that I'm going to consider cooking quick, fast, and like I want this whole structure just to be all by itself, I'm not going to shred it later, is the backstrap and the tenderloin. So I would definitely separate those out. The rest of it, you have some wiggle room to make mistakes or do quickly.
Yeah, one thing to remember with goats is not only are they biologically and genetically their own thing, but culturally, there are very few groups in North America that have worked with them as a food source historically. Coastal goats maybe in some places, but as far as traditions among indigenous folks and whatnot, and then especially European colonization coming in, we don't have like, hey, make this cut and don't follow the muscle line. We don't have centuries of that info sitting out there. So this is, it provides great opportunity for experimentation and figuring out. We got another question in. You know what? I'm going to skip Marvin's real quick because he's our board chair and I can do that if I want. And we'll go back to Andrew's second question. Andrew followed up: could you smoke it to make a pulled pork, air quotes, type meal, or is it too lean for doing a straight up? I'm thinking someone, they've got their what I call a deck microwave, a Traeger. That kind of application. Would you put it in a smoker, or would you want to try to stick to that braising? And maybe describe what braising is for those who don't know.
Yeah. So you could smoke this. You could smoke some of these types of meat. If you're going to smoke it, I would recommend maybe something quite large if you're going to go that avenue, but it applies to the low and slow method. My only hesitation is just don't bring it to barbecue town. Like, don't just dump in some barbecue sauce that you got from the grocery store once it's done and say like, okay, barbecue, pulled pork sandwiches tonight. I would encourage you to look into maybe some cultures that have smoked goat, what they do with it. And the pulling of like the pulled pork idea is great. Totally. But it's the same result that you're going to get from something like braising it. And when you braise, it really is just referring to cooking it in some sort of liquid for a long period of time. And what's great about that is it infuses it both with flavor and moisture and gives it that really awesome pulled pork like succulence to it. You'll get that from braising, but there's nothing wrong with smoking it. I think it's not too lean for that. It's great. Just don't go slathering it in barbecue sauce afterwards.
Korea actually has a couple traditional goat smoking recipes. So maybe look at some Korean options. You will be dealing with some spice. I got to warn you that's if you're scared of spice, you're going to learn that end of it real fast. Marvin, our board chair, he has a question. Let's talk about organs. Oh, first off, he says, I'm one of those BC goat hunters. Sorry, Marvin. Let's talk about, no, I'm not sorry. You get to hunt goats over the counter. What am I saying? He's showing his face too. I've been taking the goat hearts home and cooking them up. What are your thoughts and recommendations on cooking the organs like the heart and the liver? Talking about using the whole goat here. So I'm going to expand it from there. Let's say heart, liver, and maybe sweetmeats. What are your recommendations?
Great. I think you're probably falling on the spectrum of people that are real into goat flavor and are not afraid to get down and dirty with some of those flavors that might be off-putting to other people. I'm in your boat too. And I always save heart and liver from everything. I love a liver pate. I love the heart of any animal. I think it's the best, most delicious piece of it, and also the most rewarding to eat. But they do take some finessing when it comes to cooking. And the liver is one of those things that I would not recommend the quick sear, gonna eat this liver and onion style, not gonna be all that awesome with goat. There are gonna be a lot of flavors in there that are really intense. And I would say the same thing for deer and elk. It's a pretty intense method of madness if you're gonna go that way. So maybe look into liver pates that allow the flavors to mesh with some other things. There's one that I like that has sherry, shallots, garlic, thyme, rosemary, and you blend it all. So it's a smooth pate and you cook it and then you spread it on bread. It's wonderful. Something pickled on top. What a great way to experience the liver of one of those animals. So heck yeah, on the liver, just make sure that you're doing things that don't turn you off from it and give the liver some more background noise. For the heart, I think the heart's a bit more versatile. For me, it doesn't carry as much of the flavor as the liver does. But I would still probably go the route of cooking it with flavors that meet its boldness. And I love making heart tacos. I make them with potatoes and a ton of spices and not necessarily heat, like cumin and coriander, and I'll marinate it overnight in garlic and olive oil, fry it so it gets a nice color on it, but then I'll actually braise it further so that it breaks down some of that muscle and is softer than a lot of the heart sometimes you eat. It's like rubber. So sear, braise, cook it with some potatoes, throw it in a taco. It's going to be delicious. So 100% heart and liver. Yeah.
So your big points I'm catching here are heat and acid. Take care of a lot of the struggle with a goat.
Yeah, and just flavor profiles that don't do it injustice, like flavor profiles that will help it along and make sure that you're not just eating straight goat burger.
Awesome. Hey, if there are any other questions, now's your chance to get them in. I'm going to give it a couple more seconds here. But Shannon, thank you so much for taking the time today. Again, her business is Gastrognome Meals. So like gastropub, and then gnome, like what we steal out of people's yards for a senior prank. Gastrognome. And she's doing this as a volunteer service. We're not like paying Shannon to be here. She's doing this to help raise awareness for the work that the Goat Alliance does. And also because she cares about, that the goat is taken care of. She cares about the food. She cares about all these good things. And so I just want to express thankfulness from the Goat Alliance for that. And it looks like we don't have any other questions. So Stacy, do you have anything? Oh, wait. Oh, Andrew threw one here at the last second. First and best recipe to try and make for a first time goat meat eater? What's your first one? Is it those tamales, or what are you doing for
Oh,
your
that's too
first mountain goat?
complicated.
It is
Um,
complicated. The masa and the corn wraps.
Yeah, I'm going goat birria. I think it is easy enough to put your foot in the door and also have results that you're like, damn, I'm good. So I would go that route. Yeah, I think it's a really fun dish to do. And when you do that, make sure that you follow the techniques and recipes. Like, don't look up a modern one. Nothing against like modern hunting forums and their offerings there, but like pull out a Mexican cookbook.
Yes.
Or Google something that says traditional birria recipe and follow it to a T. Like, listen to how long they say you're supposed to braise this. If they tell you to sear it ahead of time and you're supposed to toast the chilies and soak them, do all the things that you're supposed to do so you end up with the product that you really want to. No shortcuts there. Just do the thing that it says, but that would be a really fun one.
A great birria recipe that I've now used it for mountain goat, and I've used it on elk and venison, and I used it on an actual like domestic goat this last year, is from, you go on YouTube, it's called the Babish Universe, and he goes down to southern Mexico, and it's like a 24-hour deal. So, think long-term and stuff, but the ingredients you can pick up anywhere. Like they show like, here's all these different chilies and stuff. And yeah, you can order those, but go to your Winco or something equivalent. Then go to the Hispanic section and those chilies are going to be there. You follow the directions like Shannon said. And like, we're talking orange juice and like actual animal crackers. Like that's one of the parts that goes into the recipe. My God, that meal. My mouth's watering just thinking about it. So yeah, thank you for your time, Shannon. Thank you for taking this and giving this to the Goat Alliance. And Stacy, I'm going to hand it over to you. If you wouldn't mind mentioning a few things just about goat counts, because those are coming up very soon. And I think folks should know about them. Yeah.
They are coming up very soon. But no, Jared, you put it perfectly. Thank you so much for your time, Shannon. And as well for you, Jared. That was a great presentation. And I think there was a lot of really good information. Yes, goat count season is upon us. We are still in the works on a few more counts, but anybody can pencil in July 15th, 16th weekend. We have 2 counts happening, one in the Bridgers Mountains in Montana and another at Lake Chelan in Washington. And we've been invited back to Glacier National Park later in August, the August 20th week. So pencil it in, more information will be to come. And hopefully a lot more goat counts. It's that time. So yeah, with that wraps up our evening.
Yeah, I'll just add in, feel free to reach out to me on the Gastronome Instagram or on our email. If you shoot us an email to anything at Gastronome, it ends up in my inbox. So I'd love to talk about food. If you didn't feel comfortable asking a question tonight, or you're like, I'm never going to kill a goat, and then you pull a tag and you kill a goat, you're like, oh yeah, that shoot me an email. And even if it comes down to like whatever animal you harvested that year and you're like, okay, I'm stuck. What were the 2 books you said? Feel free to reach out. I'm really passionate about making sure that people utilize the whole animal. And there's nothing that can't taste delicious. So even if it's an old goat.
And I can verify that she answers random people's messages too, because I'll find out from some random person in the Bozeman area. I'll be like, where'd you get this recipe? It's amazing. And they'll be like, oh, I DM'd Gastronome. Shannon totally responded and answered. Like, she does it. She's not making this up. Like, she actually does this. Yeah. I guess that's what happens after you're used to working under the pressure of a Michelin star restaurant. You're willing to deal with the general public on our cooking questions. But yeah, seriously, check them out. Amazing backcountry meals. Really delicious too.
Thanks.
Oh, actually, Shannon, I do have one question.
Yeah.
Wine pairing. Do you have any suggestions for wine and goat meat?
And for sure, I think they're going to be a beautiful combination, but you do have to think about the rest of the flavor profile and seasonality. I would never be like, oh, make a white wine spritz for your winter meal. So thinking about more of those like Greek, Mediterranean, lighter flavors, you're cooking outside, you've got this whole leg of lamb roasting. You can smell the rosemary. It's hot outside. there's probably going to be some beautiful like Rieslings or things along those lines that are clean and bright. If you're talking about like sitting inside and there's a fire going and you've got these warm tomato, garlic type of things, you're going in the Italian ossobuco route. Think more of a dark, rich red that's going to meet those flavors. You don't want to pair that with like a bright white wine. Some of the Indian dishes and the things that have like higher heat levels, white wine's going to be probably the right avenue to cut into that heat. You'll have to do some digging into like high acid, low sugar type of wines for that type of thing. But either way, you're going to have all sorts of options, but start with like when you're cooking it, what's the vibe? Are you inside? Are you outside? Are they high spice levels? Are they earthy? And then go from there.
Excellent. Nope, that all sounds very good. But yeah, no, I think that brings us to our time. I think that was a ton of great information. I can't thank you enough, Shannon, for your time, and thank you, Jared, for helping host. And with that, we will end the meeting so everybody can enjoy the rest of their evenings. Thank you so much for attending.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a great night.